Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are attempting something a little bit different. We're usually looking at modern tech or maybe recent history, things that feel very tangible. But today we are traveling back in time. We're going to the medieval Islamic world.
It's a fascinating place and time to visit.
But here's the hook, and this is what really grabbed me when I was looking through the materials. We aren't just looking at the empires and the caliphs and the wars, though we'll touch on those. We're looking at the mind.
Right.
Specifically, two radically different ways of understanding reality that emerge, side by side in this period.
It's fundamentally a story of dualities.
Exactly. On one hand, you have this intense journey inward into the heart mysticism, poetry, the Sufis.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you have the surprisingly rigorous, almost sci-fi obsession with the outward world, looking at the smallest building blocks of matter. We're talking about medieval atomic physics.
Which is something most people definitely do not associate with the Middle Ages.
Not at all. I think most of us assume atomic theory is a modern invention. So, to guide us, we have a really interesting stack of research today. We've got an encyclopedic history of Sufism, a classic sociological study on the mood of medieval Islam and its relationship with Christendom, and to get really nerdy, which I love, we have a doctoral thesis on Islamic atomic theory.
So, some heavy hitters.
Absolutely. So, what's our mission here? What are we trying to pull out of this stack?
I think the goal is synthesis. We want to see how the medieval Muslim world tried to answer that ultimate question. What is the nature of God in existence?
Okay.
And the fascinating thing is they didn't just have one answer. They had the answer of the mystic, the Sufi, who wanted to feel God. And they had the answer of the theologian physicist, the Mutakallimun, who wanted to analyze the structure of the universe to prove God existed.
Heart versus head.
In a way, but as we'll see, they end up in a surprisingly similar place.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with that inward path. Sufism. I feel like in the West, when people hear Sufi, they immediately think of Rumi, poetry, maybe the whirling dervishes.
Right.
It's all very aesthetic and beautiful.
Which is accurate, but that's the end result of a long evolution. The sources make it clear that Sufism didn't start as poetry and dancing. It started as something much grittier.
Right. The history source mentions it started as Zud.
Yes, zoot, or renunciation.
Mm-hmm.
To understand this, we have to look at the 8th century. You have to remember the context. The Islamic Empire was expanding rapidly. I mean, we are talking about an explosion of power and money. Enormous wealth was pouring into cities like Baghdad and Damascus. You had palaces, gold, silk.
So it was a time of serious excess.
Serious excess. And naturally, some people looked at all that bling, all that sudden materialism, and said, this isn't what it's about. We're losing the plot.
It was a counterculture movement.
Exactly. It was a spiritual rebellion. You had thugs like Hassan al-Basri or Ibrahim ibn Adham. The research mentions Ibrahim actually walked away from a life of royalty. He was a ruler in bulk to live in radical poverty.
The classic prince to pauper story.
Because it resonates. It was asceticism, it was fear of God, rejection of the world, wearing rough wool to irritate the skin.
Which is where the name comes from, right?
It's the likely origin, yeah.
Yeah.
Stuff meaning wool. So, Sufi.
So it started as a rejection of the material world. It was about discipline and fear of judgment. When did the love poetry come in? Because that seems like a huge shift in tone.
That's the second stage, and it's a crucial pivot. The sources highlight a woman named Rabia Alawiya. She's a pivotal figure. She shifted the focus from fear of judgment to divine love.
How did she do that?
Well, there's this famous prayer attributed to her. She basically said, "Oh God, if I worship you for fear of hell, burn me in hell.
Wow.
And if I worship you in hope of paradise, exclude me from paradise. But if I worship you for your own sake, do not withhold your everlasting beauty."
That is bold.
It changed everything. It wasn't just about avoiding sin anymore. It was about a desperate, consuming love for the divine. The goal shifted. It became about fana.
Fana. Define that for us.
It means annihilation.
Yeah.
Specifically, the annihilation of the ego. The goal is to dissolve yourself, to destroy the barrier of me, so that you converge into the one.
That sounds intense. And also, eventually this gets organized because right now we're talking about individuals.
Yes, that's the third phase our source details, institutionalization. By the 11th to 16th centuries, it's not just lonely ascetics in the desert. You have tariqa, which are orders or brotherhoods.
Okay.
You have Kanka, which are lodges.
Lodges, like a fraternity house.
Spiritual fraternity house, maybe. But yes, these were physical buildings where Sufis lived, trained, and studied under a master. It became a massive social network.
The source lists a few of these. The Mevlevi, that's Rumi's order, the whirling dervishes.
Yeah, that's the famous one.
The Naqshbandi, the Qadiri. These were big organizations.
Huge. And they played a massive role in spreading Islam. The source notes that in places like India and Africa, it wasn't the legalistic scholars who won hearts, it was the Sufis.
Right.
They adapted. They used music. They used local languages. They were approachable. The Chishti order in India is a great example of that.
But it wasn't always smooth sailing with the orthodox religious leaders, was it?
No.
I imagine the guys following the strict letter of the law didn't love the guys dancing and talking about dissolving into God.
No, there was tension. Significant tension. I mean, if you talk about Fana dissolving into God the wrong way, it sounds like you're claiming to be God.
Which is a big no-no in monotheism.
The biggest. Early Sufis were viewed with deep suspicion. Some were even executed for heresy.
So what changed?
It took a major intellectual figure, Al-Ghazali, to bridge that gap. He was a brilliant scholar who had a spiritual crisis, left his prestigious job, became a Sufi, and then wrote these massive books reconciling the two.
So he made it safe.
He made mysticism safe for the mainstream. Exactly.
So that's the inward path, dissolving the self to find God. Now, I want to pivot to the part of the research that honestly blew my mind. The outward path.
The physics.
Yes. I had no idea that medieval Islamic theology involved atomic theory. When I saw the doctoral thesis in the stack, I thought, is this a metaphor? But it's literal. It talks about kalam.
Right. Kalam basically means scholastic theology. It's the practice of debate and argument regarding religious beliefs.
Okay.
But here's the thing. To defend their theology against, Greek philosophy and other religions, these scholars, the Mutakalibun, had to develop a theory of physics.
I had to explain how the world works.
In a way that proves God exists and is active.
Yeah, and they settled on atoms.
They did. But, and I cannot stress this enough, these are not atoms like we learned in high school science. This is a very specific theological atomism.
The source introduces two key terms here, jawar and urad. Let's break those down.
Okay. Jawar is the substance, the atom itself, the fundamental particle. It occupies space, but on its own it has no qualities. It's just there.
A blank slate.
Exactly, a completely blank slate. And then you have arad. This is translated as accident or attribute.
So things like color, motion.
Color, motion, smell, life, death, hot, cold. These are all accidents.
So an atom is just a blank pixel, and the accident is the color focused on that pixel.
That is a great analogy. The atom is the pixel. The accident is what makes the pixel red or blue or bright. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The Ash'ari school, which was one of the dominant schools of Sunni theology,
Right.
they came up with a radical idea about these accidents. They believe that accidents are momentary.
Momentary. Like how momentary?
They do not endure. The source quotes a famous maxim. No accident can last for 2 successive instances of time.
Wait, let me wrap my head around this. So if I'm looking at a red apple, the redness doesn't just stay there.
According to the Ash'aris, no. God creates the redness in that instant. Then that redness ceases to exist, and in the very next nanosecond, God creates a new redness.
That sounds exhausting.
For God.
Yes. It means he's constantly working.
That's the point. It creates a view of the universe that is almost like a movie reel or stop-motion animation. You think you're seeing continuous motion, but really you're seeing a series of static images.
So does that mean cause and effect isn't real?
That is the big conclusion. They called it occasionalism. They denied secondary causality.
Can you give us an example? How does this play out in the real world?
The classic example from the tests is fire and cotton. You bring fire close to cotton, and the cotton burns. We say the fire caused the burning.
Right, it's a law of nature.
The Ash'ari physicist says, no, the fire is just a substance. It has no power. It's dead matter. The burning is an accident.
So what happened? Why did the cotton burn?
They would say, God created the fire. Then God created the burning in the cotton at the moment the fire touched it. It's a correlation, not a causation.
Just a habit.
It's God's custom or habit to make cotton burn when fire is near. But it's not a law of nature. God could choose not to create the burning.
It's like a video game code. When player touches fire object, the code triggers damage. But the fire object didn't actually do anything. The code did it.
That is a perfect way to look at it. The universe is running on a script that's being executed line by line in real time.
And this explains miracles for us.
Exactly. This is one of the main reasons they developed this theory. If the fire doesn't burn the prophet Abraham, which is a story in the Quran, it's not that the laws of physics were broken.
There are no laws of physics to break.
Exactly. It's just that God didn't create the burning accident in that particular moment. He just skipped a line of code.
That is a mind-bending way to look at reality. Why did they go to such lengths? Why invent this pixelated stop-motion universe?
To prove, Tayyid, the absolute oneness and power of God.
Okay.
If atoms have their own power, or if matter is eternal, then God isn't the sole creator. But if every single atom needs God to give it attributes every single second, then the universe is utterly dependent on God.
It's total control.
Total sovereignty. Now, to be fair, the source does mention the Maturity school, which was the other big Sunni school.
Right.
They were a little softer on this. They allowed for some secondary causality. But the Ash'ari view, this idea of continuous creation, became incredibly dominant.
So we have the Sufis dissolving themselves into God, and the physicists dissolving the continuity of time into God. It really is two sides of the same coin.
It is. But we have to remember, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. This deep thinking was happening in a very specific and often very dangerous world.
Right. Let's widen the lens.
Yeah.
Segment 3, the world stage. We have this source by von Grunebaum about the mood of the times.
And let me tell you, it wasn't a relaxing mood.
No. He describes it as a world of terrifying instability.
Life was short. You had plagues, you had invasions, the Mongols were coming from the east, the Crusaders were coming from the west.
It's the feeling that history is rushing toward Judgment Day.
Yeah. And in that timeline, you have this massive rivalry, Islam versus Christendom.
East versus West.
The irony, as the source points out, is that while they hated each other, they thought exactly alike.
How so?
They both lived in theocentric universes. God was the center of everything. They both believed they had the only truth, and they both viewed the other not just as an enemy, but as a theological error.
The misconceptions they had about each other were hilarious, though. The source lists some of the myths the West had about Islam.
Oh, the polemics were wild. Propaganda was alive and well in the Middle Ages. There was a popular story in Europe that Muhammad was actually a Roman cardinal.
A cardinal?
Yes. The story went that he failed to get elected pope, so he ran off to the desert to start his own religion out of spite.
The disgruntled employee theory of history.
Precisely. And I like the one about the dove.
Oh, yes. Tell that one.
So, to explain how he received revelation, the European myth claimed he trained a white dove to pick corn out of his ear.
No.
Yes. So when people saw the bird landing on his shoulder, they would think the Holy Spirit was whispering to him.
Creative. You have to give them points for creativity.
Very creative. And on the flip side, the Muslims viewed Christians as polytheists because of the Trinity.
Right. 3 in 1.
They couldn't wrap their heads around it, so they just assumed it was 3 gods.
But despite the insults and the wars, there was this grudging respect for power, wasn't there?
Absolutely. The source details these diplomatic exchanges that are just dripping with opulence. When the Byzantine ambassadors visited Baghdad or the Muslims visited Constantinople, it was all about shock and awe.
The mechanical tree. I marked that in the notes.
The Palace of the Tree in Baghdad. This is one of my favorite details. The source describes an artificial tree made of silver and gold,
Okay.
standing in a large pool. It had 18 branches, and on the branches were mechanical birds made of gold and silver.
And they moved?
They moved, they flapped their wings, they chirped.
In the 9th century?
Yes.
Yeah.
Through complex hydraulics and pneumatics. It was designed solely to make the ambassadors' jaws drop, to say, look at our mastery of the world.
It's amazing to think of that kind of engineering coexisting with this theology that says fire doesn't cause burning.
It is a massive paradox. They built machines based on cause and effect mechanics, while their theologians were arguing that cause and effect was just an illusion of God's habit.
That brings us to the synthesis. How do we connect these dots? We have the atomists seeing a pincelated universe and the Sufis feeling a unified love.
Right.
How did a single civilization hold both these ideas?
I think the key is in what they were both trying to solve. They were both wrestling with the gap between the creator and the creation.
The gap?
Think about it. God is infinite, eternal, absolute. The world is finite, temporary, flawed. How do they connect? How does the infinite touch the finite?
Okay, that's the problem. What are the solutions?
The Sufi bridges that gap by saying, I will destroy my finite self to merge with the infinite. That's the unity of being, Watat al-Wujud. They solve the problem by removing the separation.
And the physicist?
The physicist bridges the gap by making the finite world utterly dependent on the infinite for every breath, by saying the atom cannot exist for even a nanosecond without God keeping it there.
So in both cases, the universe doesn't run on autopilot.
Exactly. That is the synthesis. Whether through spiritual ecstasy or through, this quantum-like atomic theory, the medieval Muslim view was that the divine is actively, terrifyingly present.
Mm.
God isn't a clockmaker who wound up the universe and walked away. He's the one turning the gears every single moment.
It makes the world feel very fragile, but also very alive.
Fragile is the right word. If God looks away, the universe vanishes. That creates a very specific kind of psychology.
A mix of anxiety and total reliance.
Exactly.
It really changes how you read the history. It was a quest for permanence in a world they believed was constantly perishing.
Well said.
So we've gone from the wool-wearing ascetics in the desert to the mechanical birds in Baghdad and down to the very atomic structure of reality. It's been quite a journey.
It really highlights that being informed in the Middle Ages was about knowing your place in the cosmos.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the end of this deep dive.
But before we go, I think there is a final thought to chew on. A little souvenir from the Ash'ari physicist.
Did us.
We talked about the Ash'ari theory of continuous creation, the idea that you are destroyed and recreated in every instant.
Right. The stop-motion universe.
Well, if that were true, if the you from 1 second ago is technically a different creation than the you right now,
Oh, no. I see where you're going.
then does the person who started listening to this deep dive even exist anymore? Or are you a completely new person who just happens to have the memories of listening to the intro?
That is surprisingly unsettling. I'm going to need a minute to process that.
Just a little medieval existential dread to start your day.
Perfect. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you, or the new version of you, on the next deep dive.